Hello and welcome to all of you. We are gathered here today for the third of 6 sessions of the 2024 JCoR SDG Lab, which is our collective response of the members of the Justice Coalition of Religious to the conference which has just concluded at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And that conference is the 2024 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. And a significant portion of that conference was dedicated to the presentations of what are called voluntary national reviews, which are the progress reports of individual nations regarding their progress toward the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And for anyone who is not familiar, the Sustainable Development Goals are the 17-part agenda of the entire United Nations system for the years 2015 to 2030, and they encapsulate quite a few of the major social, economic, and environmental aspects of sustainable development. And importantly, they emphasize the ways in which all of those components of development are interrelated and interdependent. In our session today, we will be taking as a theme one of the 17 goals in that agenda, which is Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which is to take action in response to the climate crisis. So today we will have the opportunity to hear from several sisters, fathers, and partners in mission who are connected with Catholic congregations, and they will be sharing their own observations, experiences, and critiques with respect to the implementation of goal number 13, climate action, in their respective parts of the world. So if you look to the chat box now, you will see our list of speakers for today. And without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker for the day, Sister Biddy Rose Tiernan, who is a member of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur, to speak from her perspective and her experience in South Africa. Sister Biddy Rose, you have the floor, and I will bring up your slides on the screen.
Are you unmuted? No. Maybe the speaker's quite a few. Thank you, Teresa, and good day, good afternoon, good morning to all of us here this afternoon. As Teresa has told us, we are this afternoon focusing on goal 13, and I'm looking at what our country, South Africa, wrote in its report to the United Nations on this goal 13. Our next slide. I was quite impressed with the way the country's report began with some background, which I think helps all of us understand, those of us living in South Africa, understand where we are at this particular moment. The report comments on the country's historical reliance on a few critical sectors in the economy: gold and diamond and coal mining, agriculture and farming, which makes the country's economy sensitive and susceptible to external shocks and the change in various prices when the gold and the diamonds and various agricultural products, when the prices go up and down, our economy is quite sensitive to that. However, the report says our government is committed to diversify the economy, and I was pleased to see to incorporate small and medium enterprises. And that's very necessary because there are so many micro businesses and ways in which people living out of the towns and on the edges of the towns actually have found a way of making a living for themselves. And that's not counted. We see people sitting on street corners selling what we call fit cooks, cakes that have been made in the morning and are sold to people on their way to work. We found hairdressers and barbers sitting along the edge of streets and making an income for themselves in a way that's not regarded at all in the economy up to now. We have very high unemployment in South Africa. The end of the first quarter, nearly 33% of workable adults were not employed, and nearly 60% of young people between the ages of 15 and 24, which is really a very, very high figure and results in our young people really not being very motivated in the last years of schooling, because when they finished formal schooling, what's going to happen to them? And I was very glad to see that that was acknowledged in our government's report. What wasn't in that introduction to the report was the fact that South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient in the world. And the Gini coefficient measures the gap between the rich and the poor. And in South Africa, we have some few very, very wealthy people and millions of people at the other end of the scale. And with a country with the resources that we have, that is really something very shameful. Next slide. The report at the beginning also acknowledges the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which others have spoken about in these sessions. Something that I think is perhaps unique to South Africa is the prevalence of very different political ideologies. And although in a democracy, that is something one would welcome, in our country, it often results in violence, and people are killed by members of one party because they belong to another party. We have a very high level of violence in South Africa. Another something that the report acknowledged is the widespread corruption and political patronage. And as a result of that, ineffective state-owned operations, which cover our transport, our water, and our electricity supply. And of course, one can see how that's going to impact on the climate crisis that we are speaking about. The report also said that management and addressing the SDGs must move from the central government to the provinces and the local municipalities. And that, I think, is a very good thing. The report goes on to talk about the challenges that we are facing. And the challenges include persistent socioeconomic inequalities, which the Gini coefficient, the gap between rich and poor, is an example of. A very big skills mismatch between education and industry. And I was so interested to listen to Sister Anastasia from Kenya talking about what she is doing with her pupils in schools. Unfortunately, if our schools are registered, they need to follow the official curriculum. And it's a Western curriculum. It's not a curriculum designed to give people life skills and prepare them from different ways of survival in South Africa. I've also mentioned, I think, or implied, the infrastructure inefficiencies. There's a very slow uptake on sustainable practices, or has been up to now. The report talks about the increase in violent crime, especially violence against women and children, something that affects very many people, the rising electricity costs, and of course what powers our grid is the coal that very often that is part of our mining system. Another big challenge is the parallel public and private health systems. Those at the top of the economic scale can access private health. Our state hospitals and clinics are overcrowded, under-resourced, and it's very difficult if you need to access them. You have to spend days sometimes queuing to see a doctor or getting medicine. There is a commitment on the part of the government to renewable energy and the reduction of carbon emissions, and I'll pick that up at the end of my presentation. What I was disappointed in the report was that there was no connection made between SDG 13, I think it's called alignment, with others of the SDGs. And if we just look quickly through that list, one sees how so many of them are interconnected. And the South African report did not make any connection. It kind of treated SG 13 on its own. When I came to look at my experience, I could say, yes, my experience of living here and being very concerned about the climate crisis aligns with what the South African report said. A very slow progress in transition to low carbon economy. And perhaps that's partly been linked to the fact that some of the coal mines, the shares in these coal mines are held by some of the ministers in the cabinet up to now. There have been various frameworks for monitoring and evaluating the progress approved at the cabinet level of our government. I'm very happy to say that in May, we had an election which brought to power a government of national unity made up of 10 political parties. Now, that government's been operating for nearly 2 weeks, so we really don't know how successful it's going to be. but at least it brings together in the cabinet, driving the government, members of 10 different political parties instead of one. And I think this is a first for the African continent. We also have been recently experiencing devastating impacts of climate change. Parts of the country are experiencing drought. Other parts of the country in the last month have had devastating floods. Other parts have had fires and extreme weather conditions. So we're on the receiving end of the climate crisis. The report acknowledges, and my experience concurs with that the current legislation is inadequate and that the 2030 targets will not be reached. I think I read somewhere that at this particular point in time, maybe 17%, I don't know if that's an overall figure or just our country, 17% of the goal has been reached so far. And I think my experience would say many South Africans have not integrated climate resilience into their personal or business lives. And so, as I read the report, I did not experience any conflict with it, although I'm not in a position to verify the impact of various pieces of legislation that it talks about. However, I did pick up big gaps. And one of the biggest gaps, I think, is in popular education. Discourse about climate change is really regarded as a middle-class interest. Those struggling for survival in the townships, in the informal settlements and the rural areas are engaged in a struggle for survival. And that, of course, is covered by our SDGs 1 and 2. Some insights and some recommendations that came to me as I went through the report. First of all, the need for information and recommendations and plans that are contained in our report need to be made accessible to people on the ground. And I think one of the ways in which that happens is by the radio, television, and other forms of social media. And because for the last couple of months, we've been engaged in preparing for the general election and receiving the results, everything else, sadly, was pushed into the background. In the 5 mechanisms that are proposed as general recommendations in the report, 2 of which address the SDG 13 that we're talking about now, only 2 of them refer to the general population. One of those mechanisms is that we have to invest in youth. And the other one is that we have to provide more jobs so that there isn't that high level of unemployment in our country. In the recent political elections that we've had a month ago, the preparation for it went on much more than a month, numerous political parties, old and new, I think there were about 30 political parties contesting for places in our parliament, but not one of the election manifestos referred to the urgency to address climate change for for the sake of the planet's future. The report addresses the recommendations in the report, my recommendations. Much of South Africa's daily transport, people commuting into and out of the towns and the cities for work, they use combi taxis. And that's contributing to carbon emission in a big way. We need government subsidies to help transform these forms of transport to electric-powered vehicles, and it can't happen overnight. We need a 5-year plan to begin to do this. Related to that is the fact that South Africa has become, maybe other African countries too, a dumping ground for combustion engine cars that don't pass emission tests in Europe. So much stricter controls need to be put in place to monitor the aged vehicles in use in South Africa to radically decrease our carbon footprint. However, the cost of hybrid or electric cars in South Africa, electric vehicles in South Africa, at the moment puts them out of reach of ordinary people. And that's why I think the government needs to negotiate with the motor industry, and there's a big need here for public-private partnerships so that we begin to reduce the emissions that are destroying our environment. Other recommendations that I would like to suggest: information about climate change and our carbon footprints need to become a major feature in the education programs at all levels. Somehow or other, popular education about this topic isn't available. I struggled to find smaller NGOs that are working with the people who were addressing this area. And without popular ownership of the SDGs, the 2030 goals won't be met. And I think here, another recommendation I would like to see put in place, that we enlist the support and partnership of faith-based and community organizations who have a long history in South Africa of engaging in the socio-political, economic climate and working for change. The SDGs will only be realizable if we work together. And South Africa needs to invest particularly in women and in youth. Now, I have to just say something, that we wondered why the South Africa didn't give its report last Friday when it was tabled. And yesterday, our president signed into law a big document on climate change that's been circulating for 2 years. It was surprising to see it come out in the press yesterday evening. And there are some very good features in that. I think that's perhaps why our United Nations representatives didn't report last Friday when they should have, because They must have got a message that the president was about to sign off this new bill asking the country to fight climate change now. The bill, I haven't had time to read all of it, but it has some very good features, and it's committing to work with the provinces and with local municipalities to help filter down. I do think we need to enlist the faith-based organizations, the Jewish, the Muslim, and the Christian community in the next few months to make sure that we are assisting this law get down to the people. It has a 6-year program so that by 2030, South Africa hopes to be able to report better to the United Nations, and I think to the Paris Agreement. And so that's kind of a little PS that I added to my report. And I'm very happy that that came out last night. So thank you, Teresa.
Thank you very much, Biddy Rose, and for all of your thoughtful and careful reflection on that report. And we do hope we will hear from the South African government next year in July. They have said that they will report next year. So stay tuned for more.
Thank you.
And now we will go next to hear from Ms. Susan Mwangi, who is a Comboni missionary partner and a member of Vivat International, who will speak to us about climate action in Kenya. Susan?
Thank you very much, Teresa, and good day to all of us. So I don't know whether you can be able to share the screen from your side, my presentation. And just to begin my discussion, giving a background on why I chose SDG 13 as I worked in the VNR process. It is because of the challenges that we would say we have currently experienced. Early this year, in the month of May, we have had adverse effect of climate change, which we can see it has caused a lot of challenges in our social and economic development. And therefore, even as our government was reporting on SDG 13, this became very important just to see what are the mitigation, what are the adaptation and mechanisms that have been put in place to address the challenge that we have had. So just looking, are you able to move the slide? So besides the flood, we've also had, again, extreme frequencies of dry spell. And again, the communities that we are involved in, we see significant challenge. And therefore, addressing this and looking at the best mechanism becomes very paramount. But in all this, we are saying that there is need for us to be able to identify different ways that we can collaborate, different ways we can work together to address the climate crisis. And therefore, as we reviewed the VNR, as I checked around the document presented by our government, we acknowledge that there has been several steps that have been made in terms of integrating climate resilience measure, both at the local and the national government. And we see this looking at the various policies that we have, but not only, the policies, just having that in document, but also having this in practice. So in essence, we see that there are various policy, very progressive policy that have been put in place. I don't, some of these I will highlight, like what we have, the National Climate Change Action Plan, others related to waste management, all geared towards addressing the challenge that we are experiencing. But more importantly, I would say all these policies that we are seeing and their implementation, which was largely reported, that trickles down from the national level to also the county level. And out of this, there are several initiatives that have emerged from the various policies that have been highlighted. And for example, if I highlight what we have in terms of the renewable energy, because of the challenge that we see related to the issues of carbon emission and other practices that we have, the government of Kenya has committed itself to reforestation, and we have seen various practices happening even at the local level. The tree planting exercise and raising the forest cover to at least, ensuring that we have a 10% forest cover. So this initiative, not only at the, we see that it has been actualized through different drives that has been, have been spearheaded by the government, largely the president, but also we see greater collaboration with other line ministry. And we have had several occasions that tree planting has been happening. Again, in terms of accelerating practices like sustainable agriculture and promoting agroecology has also been seen right from the policy level, but also to the implementation. And as much as some of this I'm highlighting, we realize that in the reporting, that was not really, strongly, it was not really documented. And therefore, that I would say is some of the missing gap when I reviewed the report, that there are good practices already happening, but capturing them in the documentation was not strongly coming out. Again, in terms of, I would say, a model that has been taken into place of how the county can be able to finance its climate change challenges, we see the financially locally led climate action program, where now we are talking about how can we be informed at the local level, and also at the local level, we are financing climate related activity. So the FLOCA becomes a very great model that has been put in place, where the counties are working with the national government. Money is set aside to be able to support those activities. Even though this is a model that came in 2022, I did not see that documented, and more importantly, just showing us how effective has the financially locally led climate program been, because it is meant to be able to address the challenges at the local level, integrate the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge system, even at the policy level. So a very good policy, a very good initiative, but not well documented in our reporting. And especially because that is one of the indicators that is stipulated or spelled out in SDG 13. How are we integrating the policies in the action? Again, in terms of raising, the challenge of climate education has been identified as a gap. And we see that there has been great awareness, on issues related to climate, various campaigns being done. But getting that data in the documents was not available. How has, what impact on the various institutions that are already conducting such education, climate-related education, been? So again, in terms of reporting on the awareness raising and how that has also made maybe behavioral change and people taking up to practices that could address the challenge that we have in regards to climate change. So in essence, as much as I would say our report, the voluntary national report, was comprehensive as it is presented and involving different stakeholders, the gap still is seen in terms of what was presented in this report. So a bit of that data quite lacking in terms of what some of these policies have already contributed to. You'd okay. So yes, I've said one of those are the strengths that I was able to identify in terms of quite comprehensive, right? Looking at the various integration, right, from our national plans. The SDG have been integrated with our medium plan, other plans that inform us, the Africa Agenda 2063. So there is that kind of integration. So it brings a bit of it is comprehensive in and especially in the preliminary. However, when it comes to the reporting of the SDG, I would say much data was forfeited. In terms of inclusivity and the various stakeholders that were involved, quite a number of stakeholders were involved with the notion of leaving no one behind. So there was, I would say, greater consultation, greater multi-stakeholder approach in it, and different line ministry coming to bring their contribution. However, what we see is that we had, and I participated with the CSO reporting and the VNR process. We do not have that, we have the CSO report that is an appendix to the national VNR report. So maybe that what I would say is considered in the CSO is not integrated in the VNR for a national review. So some of that, I would say, may have been missed out, and especially looking at the contribution of the CSO, the faith-based organization, into the national report. However, they have put that as appendix. In terms, again, of speaking of inclusivity, the national government was able to engage the local communities through the county government, and at least there were 17 county government involved in sharing their VNR. So I would say that was quite, impressive, because now we are getting information from the local communities. That the local, there was a participatory from the local community. However, again, we have 47 county. So this was only a very, it is not even a 50% representation. Therefore, again, missing out on the voices of everybody. But at least I would say it is a milestone, because doing it at the county level then makes it more inclusive. In terms of transparency and getting those materials, I would say this was, it showed that kind of transparency, that the materials were available at the forum that we have, and especially from the national government website that is addressing the national planning docket that is addressing or involved in SDG reporting and even the whole process. So in essence, I would say, the VNR, at least represented the voices of the people, although there are places that I would say maybe more voices from other counties would have come in handy to be able to enable us see some of those challenges, because they are unique. Each of these areas present different challenges, and therefore just seeing how all this is being addressed was very important. So what are the gaps that I identified? One is in terms of data gap. Yeah, and this is quite clearly seen in what was presented with the various gap, but this also came as one of the challenges that was shared across. Data for us has always been a challenge, but I would say through the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, we are now, accepting the citizen-generated data. So that is reading those reports, the citizen-generated data becomes an input or a way to strengthen the data that is provided. But it's still a big gap that continue to be seen. So in the recommendation that I even put forward is the need to strengthen the data and how the data is collected and even the validation of that data. But one step is that, the citizen-generated data is now becoming an avenue where people in the local community can be able to share the data. Again, good policies that we have in place, but the implementation challenge. In terms of climate adaptation and mitigation, climate smart agriculture recommendation given on how to be able to address this, but the implementation challenge is one of the things that can be seen as a gap. Looking at maybe the model that I've said, that the FLOCA, the financially led locally climate action approach, at the local level, we are saying we can be able to, we are financing activity at the local level. But even though that, is in document, in reality, sometimes that does not seem to be happening. Okay, so implementation challenge in terms of policy that are there, but actualizing that becomes a challenge. Then the last one is resource allocation in terms of actualizing most of these activities highlighted, right from what we are saying, the whole VNR process, the engagement of the community and how much of resources is allocated to this. We know that the VNR gives an opportunity to be able to monitor how we are progressing in terms of the actualization of the SDG. However, again, we see that there are constraints, and that is what makes it even difficult in terms of even getting that data, engaging the community in creating the kind of awareness, because some of this, activity, for sure, they require resources. So those are some hurdles that we can say are, would be seen to have been experienced in terms of the whole process of the VNR. But all in all, we can say for the last 3 years now, Kenya is reporting, we have, we are moving forward and, good progress. And especially looking at SDG 13, which is one of the goals that we reported, that we are making good progress in addressing those challenges that we are having. So coming back to me and coming back to the organization that I work with, Comboni Alliance for Social Entrepreneurship, what has been our contribution? And in terms of SDG 13, largely we've been guided by Laudato Si in trying to address climate challenge. And we've been doing this using the goals given by the, right from the action plan. So we have been taking some of these goals one by one and trying to see how can we be able to actualize that? How can we be able to respond to the cry of the poor? And together with Justice and Peace Office and other, and even the department, we've been responding to this, having, like when we had the floods in May, we had an intervention taking food relief to the stricken area, offering other support to ensure that the communities that were affected by the flood, we were able to give them relief. So we always collaborate with the different departments. Comboni Alliance, just to say, is also working, is part of Tangaza University, and therefore we work closely as Comboni Alliance and also the Institute for Social Transformation at Tangaza University. And therefore some of this activity, you will see them are largely driven from the university level. In terms of raising awareness of ecological education, we've been doing this by sensitizing students at the university, but also the communities that we work with. I would say an activity that we did last year was sharing or screening the letter. The letter was a documentary released in 2022 by Pope Francis. Almost, Laudato Si made, easier in terms of the film. And we screened it at the university to create that awareness on the crisis, the climate crisis, and even our call to act. So besides screening it at the university, we have been doing it also with the different groups, youth group in churches and in schools, just to make people become aware of the message of Pope Francis in responding to the climate challenge. In terms of sustainable practices and sustainable lifestyle, we have created and sensitized the community on taking up on issues of, this is more of community engagement, where Laudato Si Club at the university was able to establish an ecological garden for a school that was greatly affected by the adverse drought last year in 2022. So as a group, Laudato Si, we went to the school together with the children. We managed to put an ecological garden, and it was meant to teach the community on how they can be able to have different livelihood. The community that we targeted largely dwells, or it's more of a pastoral community, pastoralist community, and therefore their way of livelihood has been keeping cows. So we wanted to show them that engaging in a sustainable practice where they can be able to cultivate and still keep the animal would be a way to address the challenge that come with the adverse effect of climate change. Many of the communities' animals were swept away, many lost their livelihood. So this was one way to engage the community, but also we hoped that it can also serve the school as a learning space. They get to see what it means to have this practice in place, looking at the curriculum that we are talking about, the current curriculum of CBC. but also making the school have, food for the children, nutritious food for the children. So that was an activity through the Laudato Si community engagement practice. The other, in terms of promoting sustainable lifestyle, is a waste management practice that we have started at the university. We say that university remains, the door or the last, the last stage between where we have our learners and they are interacting with the industry. And therefore, it is very important for us as educators to be able to stress on some of these sustainable practices that our learners can be able to see and even be able to take to the community, because we champion social transformation, and it can only be started where the students are able to see some of those practices. So Laudato Si again enabled the community, the school community, to see how they can be able to segregate waste, but out of that waste, how can they connect the waste to different, waste becoming a resource. So currently we are able to have our plastic being recycled. Our green waste, we are doing compost manure that is meant to sustain our garden and establish a Laudato Si sustainable garden that generates also food for the university. So in all this activity, what we want to drive to our students is that they can be able to create from waste, that they can be able to bring, we can be able to create, to see that waste is never waste until we waste it, and therefore driving those practices. So my recommendation and conclusion, I would say the whole experience, working through the VNR was quite enriching. This was the first time I was engaged in a VNR process, but it's enabled me to see the SDG in reality. Okay, sometimes we have the SDG there, and I have not been able to integrate this. So it became out quite real for me how to integrate SDG even with my activity as an educator, working also with community, and see how that comes out strongly. So again, it enabled me to map different stakeholders that we can be able to partner and collaborate with. Currently, I'm able to see who else is doing this and how can we collaborate with one another. Because like we have kept emphasizing, the need of working in collaboration, working in partnership is very important if we are to be able to realize the SDGs. Maybe, the challenge I would say that although I experienced was that of data collection and lack of reporting of various organizations, including our very own, the faith-based organization, that we are not involved in the VNR process. We are doing great works, a lot of intervention we are already doing, but because we are not quite involved, and I like what JCoR has, the empowerment, the VFAT International enabling us to participate in this. When now we are able to connect even with our government, the CSO in our countries, then we can be able to share our best practice, because I see the richness of not only the Catholic Church, but also the faith-based organization in bringing intervention related not only to SDG 13, but many other SDGs. So are we done? Maybe, is there something still remaining?
I think you have it covered.
All right, thank you very much. And it was great just sharing my whole process, being engaged in the VNR process.
Thank you, Susan. And I appreciate especially your reflections on progress over time from previous iterations of VNR process to the current one. You have really given a fair assessment to how much good work is already happening, and at the same time observing where the gaps are now. So thank you for your analysis, which has been very rich. And now we will hear next via a video recording from Mr. Rafael Villalobos Segura, who is a partner of the Claretian Missionaries in Costa Rica.
Saludos cordiales, espero que estén muy bien.
Greetings, I hope you're all doing very well.
Pequeño video para iniciar esta reflexión.
This is a video to begin this reflection.
Padre, el río ya no es el río. Antes de que
The
llegue el
river
verano,
no longer is
esconda usted
the
todo lo
river.
que encuentre vivo.
Before the summer,
¿Qué le han hecho al bosque, padre, que no hay un árbol?
what have they done to the forest, to the woods? There
¿Con qué
are no
leña
trees,
tendremos
Father.
fuego? ¿Y en qué sombra nos cobijaremos si el bosque ya no
And
es?
what shadow is going to protect us if there's no more
Antes de que se haga
forest?
oscuro, padre,
I cannot
guarde usted un
hear.
poco de vida en la despensa. Porque sin leña y sin peces tendremos que quemar la barca.
Without fish, we'll have to, I cannot hear.
Tendremos que arar sobre las ruinas.
We'll have
Con
to
muchas llaves la
work
puerta
on
de
the
casa.
ruins.
Y usted nos dijo, padre, que donde hay pinos
If
hay
you told
flores.
us, Father, that I cannot
Y
hear
donde hay
anything.
flores hay
I'm
abejas.
sorry.
Y hay cera y
Where
miel.
there are bees and
Pero el campo ya
honey,
no es ese campo.
but the field is no longer the field.
Siempre rojo y anunciando lluvia de sangre.
They're announcing a rain.
Son monstruos de carne con gusanos de hierro.
These are monsters of
Asómese.
flesh with
Y
worms
les
of
dice que
iron.
usted nos tiene a nosotros.
Look out
Y les dice que nosotros no tenemos miedo.
if you tell us
Pero
that we're not
asómese,
afraid,
porque son los que están
but
matando.
look, because we are those that are being killed.
Padre, deje usted de llorar.
Here. Stop
Que nos
crying,
estamos
Father.
Desde los años 70, esta canción ha estado sonando y
This
parece
song
que
has been playing since
no
the
tomamos
70s,
conciencia de la
and-
realidad tan dura,
and I
tan
was
difícil
taking it
estamos
from the
experimentando en el
reality.
planeta.
I insist in saying they're inseparable in their concern for nature, the justice for the poor, the commitment with society, and inner peace. He insisted on the need to build a society based on an economy that favors peace and not a war, that's something that cares for creation, not Robert, something that's the service of the person, the family, where care replaces the throwaway indifference, an economy that leaves no one behind, recognizing a dignified job and empowering the cultures, the traditions, the species that live on Earth to fight against poverty in all its forms and reduce inequalities. The Pope Francis has insisted on all these points because at the root of all evil, there's the existing inequality and this destruction of the planet. It's an economy that goes against life, an economy that simply favors benefit, profits, competition, and doesn't care about destroying creation and destroying millions of people. That is why this objective of sustainable development, this action for climate, invites us to ask ourselves as something that the indigenous communities are asking for. Do we want to devour or safeguard the world? Because as based on what we're doing, there's a negative impact that is destroying us. This objective invites us to strengthen resilience and the capability to adapt to the risks related to climate and the natural catastrophes in every country, to improve education, the awareness and the reduction of climate change, adjusting to it, reducing the effects, and early warning. And we see that this is very much in line with the objectives of Laudato Si, that invite us to not be insensitive to the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, those to look for an ecologic economy. Education should not forget the ecologic dimension, to have resilience, empowerment of the community, and at the basis of all, there has to be an ecologic spirituality, and this should lead us to adopt sustainable lifestyles. As a Claretian family in Central America, how have we put this into practice? It was very important to go through workshops and formation processes to be helped in being aware of the reality that we're living. Concrete actions that we can actually carry out. These formations have been translated into workshops in urban projects that help families to go against this culture of consumption and throwaway. While having small vegetable gardens at home to help them feed themselves and, if possible, to also market the products. A great leader in this process is our companion Rosie Rios. The young of Claretian youth have been involved in this process. They too have been through formation processes, composting, and promoting a different lifestyle. And also, we've been close to the indigenous communities of the original peoples of Costa Rica, learning from them and supporting them in their fights. Unfortunately, here in Costa Rica, the defense of the land of indigenous people have made victims, have murdered indigenous leaders who have been fighting to recover their lands. In Guatemala, there's a beautiful process that's being done there, led by Linda Chocajal. These are the saving boxes that seek to empower indigenous women, the Maya and the Quechua, and to have productive projects in harmony with nature. All these projects are very significant, and they are giving a human face to their economy, helping them to move forward in their families and communities. In Panama, last year, there was a strong fight against mining, and recently the organizations, the social and church organizations where Claretian missionaries are involved, have been attentive to all this issue about mining, because the large companies don't want to lose. And in Honduras, for many years, there's been a great fight against mining companies who have tried to leave many communities without water. We remember Berta Cas, who fought to care for and protect the river for the sake of the families. The Claretian missionaries and all those who are in line with Claret's spirit have also been supporting this fight of the communities. And I'm sharing this brief video from this community in the Atlantic zone of Honduras, where the community organized itself to resist against the interests of the mining companies and to defend and protect the water. They had no water in their community. I feel very thankful with you, starting with the parish, but also all the organizations, how they've supported this project. I am very thankful to you because you've always helped, and truly may God bless you as you invested in this project. My name is Carmen. I'm from the community of New Hope. These fights continue. That is why every year there's the Day for Life and Peace. I am a Claretian missionary. I'm here precisely at the Monument for Life and Peace, inviting you to join in this march on Saturday, August the 3rd at 7 in the morning at the Park Rivera Hernandez, walking toward this monument for justice and peace. May the Spirit of the Lord continue to animate us in this mission.
We give our thanks to Rafael for his presentation, bringing together many good Claretian projects from different parts of Latin America. And now we will hear next from Father Norbe Tapiero, who is a Claretian missionary who is in Colombia. Father Norbe.
Good morning. This is Father Norbe from El Castillo in Colombia, where the rural mission is located. I don't know whether you can share the slides or should I? The slides to begin. So in Colombia, there's this report from the civil society about how the Colombian government has made progress to fight against the climate changes and its effects. Following slide. Colombia is a highly vulnerable country to the effects of climate change because of its geography and diversity and ecosystem. For the Colombian state, climate changes is a major issue that has to be addressed urgently, because in Colombia we have the three we have different climates, three weathers, a mountain and other. Colombia's country that is rich in biodiversity, but there are also strong effects due to climate change. Next. One of the effects or challenges is the effect of climate change on human life. One of the consequences has been death because of floodings, torrents in the avenues, and the number of deaths for this reason increased from 89 in 2015 to 152 in 2022, while the number of affected people grew from 990 to 1,096, which shows an increase in the effects and in the gravity of these events. We say that climate changes affects all the places where there are rivers and flooding affecting the crops and the people. And the second reality is the corruption at the National Unit of Risk Management. In Colombia, there's been corruption that came from previous governments about how corruption from previous years has allowed the assignation of resources, inattention and prevention, increasing vulnerability and the exposure of the country to climate changes. So it is critical to prioritize the investments in prevention measures to reduce the adverse impacts of the natural catastrophes and strengthen the resilience of Colombian communities. This national unit of risk management have been corrupted and have not invested their money in the prevention of the risks or responding to floods. Next. The third effect regards agriculture. Climate changes are affecting the food security in countries such as Colombia. Here, where I'm located, a month ago, we had a flood, and some farmers that were cultivating yuca, plantain, or corn were affected by the flooding. And the river we see there overflew, also putting at risk the life of the people and affecting the crops. So we see how the increase in temperature, the changes in the rain, these climate events are affecting significantly the agricultural production. So it is important to promote public policies to reduce and mitigate the climate changes. This is the government is trying to mitigate. Another fourth effect is the violence in the territories. In Colombia, the deforestation grew after the peace agreements, and so there's still disputes, land disputes that continues progressing. Previously, where there was a prevalence of guerrillas, they were in the mountainous area, and they did not allow deforestation. And the deforestation increased for the single cultures or illegal crops. It's been a problem in the territories with regard to illegal crops that also raises risks for the environment. The next one. Another fourth effect is against health. We see the impact on the Colombian health. In 2019, the low temperatures took 7,141 lives, while the heat caused 2,332 deaths. In 2024, this phenomenon intensified the drought, affecting the availability of water with repercussions in agriculture and food security. Cities like Bogota had the scarcity of water. Here in Colombia, they had to take measures in order to respond to the drought. In some places where water was scarce. So this year, the community or the civil society is aware of this water right or the importance of water in our lives. And the fifth point is the law against the single-use plastics. That is, this is something positive. Recently, the Colombian government passed a law that prohibits single-use plastic in protected areas. This is an initiative to reduce the plastic contamination. So you go to the store and we have to bring something to bring back what we're going to buy. There's a law that prohibits the use of plastic in stores. It's a great initiative because that reduces the plastic contamination. A sixth point, as far as challenge this year in 2024, in October here in Colombia at Cali, it will be the location of COP16. COP16 is a conference to address the protection of biodiversity and the importance of the Amazon as the lung of the world. To Colombia is a place where we are also part of the Amazon. We have páramos. We're very rich in biodiversity. So Colombia has this great challenge to create public policies to help take care of this lung for the world and to help the world also reduce fossil fuels. So that's why this important event is going to be held in Colombia. The seventh point is the implementation of the Escazú Agreement. Colombia has been in the process of ratifying the Escazú Agreement that seeks to protect the environmental defenders and strengthen environmental democracy. Colombia is the most dangerous countries for environmental defenders. A few years ago here, we made some reports. We denounced and we did some marches against a mining and petrol company, an oil company that wanted to come into this region. And we received a threat from a paramilitary group that they call the Daitanists, a paramilitary group that finances the major companies here in Colombia. So we, as Claretians, received a threat, not was a specific name, but it was against the missionaries, the priests that prevent development and prevent jobs. So we had like guerrillas here in our region. So we've been threatened for defending the right to water, the right to the woods, and to be against the mining industry. Next. What are the actions that the government can carry out to address the climate changes? So initially, there's a national plan to adjust to climate changes. The government has been defining these plans that seek to reduce the vulnerability of population and the ecosystems through the integration of measures for adjustment in policies and sectorial plans as well as territorial ones. 2, contributions at the national level. Colombia has committed to reduce its greenhouse effect gases by 51% by 2030, in comparison to a baseline scenario. This is what the government has done, but we see that we are far from complying with this. A third action is the Colombian strategy for development, for a development that is low in carbon. This promotes a sustainable economic growth and reduces emissions through the implementation of policies and projects that promote the energy efficiency, the use of renewable energies, and the reduction of deforestation. There's been projects including renewable energy in some companies and some areas of some La Bajira, where vulnerable populations had no energy, and the government brought them some solar panels, alternative energy. So it's about moving on to renewables. And so we're introducing alternatives such as renewable energy, and also the commitment to reduce deforestation, especially Colombia. Colombia has had to go from the coltan growth. I mean, there's a lot of deforestation so that the farmers can produce other crops that are not damaging for nature. There's been programs, but there's still a lot of work to do when it comes to this action. And the fourth action, program of biodiversity and ecosystemic services. Colombia is working at the preservation and restoration of critical ecosystems to reduce and adjust to climate changes due to the floods and the phenomenon of El Niño or La Niña. These Colombia has had to raise awareness about the preservation and restoration of critical systems to mitigate the effects of climate changes that we've experienced. So the fifth action is the plan to integrate the action on the territory climate changes. The government is implementing plans from a regional level, actions for climate change in the region. And the sixth action is promoting renewables. Colombia has increased its capability to generate renewable energies as solar energy, wind energy. We've seen some progress in Colombia in this process. And the same action is the reforestation and preservation of forests, initiatives that seek to protect forest areas that are affected by the armed conflict, contributing to the reduction in carbon and the preservation of biodiversity. There's been initiatives also through the university, through education. The government has been spreading that culture about planting a tree. And the eighth action to fight against climate changes is education and awareness raising. This is also very important. These are educational programs and campaigns for awareness raising that seek to increase public awareness about the importance of climate preservation. And we see this through the media, where based on small spaces, we begin also raising that awareness. Following The next slide, please. As religious exploration missionaries here in Colombia, in Eastern Colombia, where I am, what actions are we carrying out to address climate changes? Well, due to the same reality that we experience in Colombia, where we, the Claretians, are, we see some actions. One is education and awareness raising through critical awareness, through the analysis of reality to promote awareness when it comes to climate changes. Celebrating the day for water, environment, the earth, and recycling and not using throwaway or single-use dishes or cups. So we try to use nothing that is of single use, and that is very important. We've also been based on the encyclical letters such as Laudato Si and the pastoral letters regarding the common home. And also Mi Querida Amazonia by the Pope has been a document we've used to create an awareness when it comes to care of creation. The second initiative has been the organic home gardens, vegetable gardens in some schools. The teachers are very much following this path to implement Laudato Si. Based on the experience of the vegetable gardens in schools and parishes. Here in my parish, we are doing like, we're creating like an organic vegetable garden. This has been an initiative to promote these organic vegetable garden. A third action has been to support organizational projects for the defense of the territory in the region of Ariari. There are regions where we meet as Claretians, precisely in this area of Ariari. This is a region that is very close to Sumapaz, where the great rivers are born. It's a factory of water and it's a very threatened. The risk is to let the oil and mining industry in. So the missionaries, we've done mobilizations to reduce the mining industry in order to take care of biodiversity and also the agriculture in this region. So we've also done those peaceful mobilizations to raise awareness about the defense and the care of natural resources. So in this area, we've also implemented ecotourism, sustainable ecotourism, so that many people can become familiar with our richness, but also to take care of it. Next slide. I was also talking about the risk of a mining country. They have been here and also in that mining country that wants to exploit. There's like a community. There's a community aqueduct, so they can also defend their aqueduct from mining, and also when it comes to privatization. Here we see a picture to celebrate the 28th anniversary of the community aqueduct for the protection of the water production. And there was a formation for the process of critical formation of the aqueduct, rejecting privatization. So as Claretian missionaries, we accompany those aqueducts so that they can be empowered and defending this water resource as a human right and a fundamental right. This has been the presentation about Colombia when it comes to climate action. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Father Norbe. And I am so impressed by your careful analysis of really the entire policy framework in Colombia that relates to goal number 13, and also the way that you have a comprehensive view of the interconnected elements of conflict, of health, of climate change and livelihoods, as well as education. A very good and integrated view, and also integrating spiritual components into the need for formation in the way that these different challenges relate. Thank you very much for your contribution. And we will take the opportunity to hear a short video recording from Sister Melania Nyamukua, who is a member of the International Medical Association Sisters in Zimbabwe.
Greetings to you all. I'm Sister Melania from Zimbabwe, International Medical Association Sisters. It's a congregation of missionary sisters. I'm working in St. Albans Mission Hospital, especially in the community, as a community home-based care program. And we are participating in SDG 13, Agent Action to Combat Climate Change. The drivers of climate change and environmental degradation in Mzalabani district are as follows. We have people who are cutting trees. Since we have a lower and upper Mzalabani, we stay near border Mozambique. So in the lower, where it's near border Mozambique, people are there. It was supposed to be a grazing area, but people are living there and they don't cultivate much. And what is cultivated is cotton. So for living, they have most of them, they are cutting trees and making charcoals to buy food, so that they get money, they buy food. And here lower, upper Mzalabani, we have people who cultivate tobacco. And in order for tobacco to be sold well, we need to burn it. So we need to cure it. So curing it, they use firewood. And they're cutting trees so that they get firewood. We have also a challenge of wildfire. People are burning grass. When they burn grass, this is over 75% of ground covered burnt, and this is increasing the global warming. We have also the steam bank cultivation as a source of livelihoods. People, they dig in the river bank where they end up having gullies, having siltation, and also making it flooding. And we have deforestation, whereby people they chop trees to make charcoal to sell to get food. The most challenging thing is the cutting of trees, all over cutting trees to make charcoal in order to get money to buy food. As our area here for interventions, we are saying we need to do awareness campaign to the people so that they know that cutting trees, it causes global warming. It causes challenges in future, also that when there is wind, everything will be carried away. We need also to give the income generating activities so that people have something to eat, something to live on, something to sustain themselves. We would like also to establish the biogas planting as a way to manage methane, so that people, they use the cow dung. This cow dung, they put it in the biogas as a way to reduce carbon emission, leading to global warming. We are also encouraging to make bylaws in our places. This will be a way of punitive to people, especially when they do the fire world and the other bad practices of deforestation. I think with this, we help our people, especially knowledge is power. Thank you very much to all those who are listening to us. But what I think is a big challenge is the need to balance development priorities with the climate change. Our people are very poor. They don't have food. But then we are saying don't cut a tree. How can a person survive? We have also political will, which is in their interest as the politics. They don't say anything to people because they want also their interests. So people will continue to do what they are doing, especially of cutting trees, the deforestation. We hope with this it will help a lot of people as we do the awareness. Thank you.
Wonderful spotlight from Sister Melania on the tension between providing for the basic needs of the most vulnerable and also addressing the systemic challenge of climate change and the impact that it has on us all. Now we will hear from Ms. Maria Cabello Vasquez, who is an associate of the Congregation of Notre Dame de Montreal, who will speak in response to the situation in Mexico. Maria?
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here. I am from the Congregation of Notre Dame. I'm an associate there, and I've been very fortunate to be able to attend this forum in these last 2 weeks. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And so this morning, or wherever the time is, wherever you're at, I want to speak about action SDG 13. And it actually has to do with the country of Mexico. I was born in Mexico, but I currently live in the United States. And I chose Mexico because of my interest really in how countries are prioritizing, or maybe not, the politics of climate action. And so I was especially interested in Mexico because of its positive economic turnaround these last couple of years. As indicated in their 2024 VNR, they have invested in social programs that have helped people economically. For the good of all, the poor come first. These are the words that have guided them in their strategies. Yes, they have made significant and important improvements that have helped those that need it most. Yet, as I reflect on the VNR report, I realized I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more clarity, more transparency, more information on any significant improvements in climate action, especially in decreasing the usage of fossil fuels. According to a report from Yale Climate Connections, Mexico is the 10th most populated country with the 12th largest economy, and it's also the 11th most climate polluting country in the world. It is the second largest greenhouse gas emitter in Latin America and the Caribbean. Mexico is a country with many natural resources and a rapidly growing economy. Given its economic strength and vast resources in solar and wind energy, the country has gone back to its heavy reliance on fossil fuels. They have the potential to become a global leader in renewable energy generation. And yet the current president, López Obrador, has said that it's not time yet. So I want to look at these next three slides. I thought it was important to see where Mexico is with climate action. And what I found was very important. In 2012, Mexico became the first large oil-producing emerging economy to adopt climate legislation, which meant, one, it would reduce emissions 30% by 2020 compared to a 2000 business as usual baseline. Two, further emission reductions of 50% by 2050. Three, 35% non-fossil fuel generation by 2024, which includes large hydro and nuclear. And so when we look at the next law, which they call Mexico's Energy Transition Law, which is in 2015. And here it reinforces the 35% clean energy by 2024, and then extends it to 60% by 2050. It establishes a smart grid program, recommends incorporating social and environmental externalities into energy project evaluations, creates an energy transition board with private sector and civil society representation to oversee these the process. These are all very good goals, and yet there really is not a more transparent and accountable plan in place onto how it would happen. And then in 2020, there were reforms to the general climate change law. What this did is eliminated the climate change fund, and in 2021, the National Institute for Climate Change was dissolved. So what happened, right? So in these three slides that I showed, three leadership changes, which is a precedent in each one, and each had their own agenda in terms of climate change. In this current plan, though, President Obrador has gone back to using fossil fuels and has a hold on renewable energy investments. So when we look at, excuse me, Mexico's climate pollution, it predominantly comes from three sectors: transportation, which is 30%, power, 29%, and industry, which is 27%. The country's power sector emissions have been rising, especially over the past 2 years, as the government has prioritized fossil fuels and has reduced its hydroelectricity production. So when you look at here, in 2023, Mexico's share of clean electricity generation fell below 22% after peaking at 27% right here in 2021. And so this will fall short of the 5% clean power target by 2024, set in its 2012 climate law. Most of the country's power comes from natural gas, and more than 3/4 produced by burning fossil fuels. As a result, Mexico's overall climate pollution has risen above 33% above 2000 levels. Between 2015 and 2020, Mexico's coal generation fell 60%, one of the highest rates of reduction in the world. Wind and solar power filled most of the gap left by coal, sorry, with only small amounts of gas generation now added. So by the year COVID-19 pandemic began, wind and solar made up 10% of Mexico's electricity, exceeding the global average of 9.4% for the first time. So here we are, 2019, as you could see. And then we have the increase in 2022, and then decreases again in 2023. And then in 2021, what happened here is that Mexico had a refinery under construction in Tabasco, Mexico. And then in 2022, they bought a refinery in Texas. But what also happened in 2022 that increased the fossil fuel was the war with Ukraine, with Russia and Ukraine. And so when we look at what's Mexico's progress towards their benchmarks, it was very interesting to see, like right here, we have clean electricity. You know, by 2035, they want 100% clean electricity. And we're still down below in the 20 percentile, which makes it really challenging to see them make their benchmark by 2035. By 2030, it was no coal, and then by 2035, no fossil fuels. So when we look at the coal down at the bottom, here we are, and by 2030 was no coal. And then when we get the fossil fuels, which we're at above 75% of fossil fuel usage, and yet by 2035, it's no fossil fuels. Those were the benchmarks. I don't think that's going to happen. The zero carbon intensity by 2034, zero carbon. Right now, we're here at this point above 500. Oops, sorry. And the benchmark by 2035 was zero. So when we look at all the overall goals and benchmarks that they themselves put in place, it's not going to happen. Right now, the Climate Action Tracker actually rated Mexico's climate targets and action as critically insufficient. So when we look at others, Mexico's energy transitions, it's a complex political and economic process. While the country possesses great potential for renewable energy development, significant political and institutional obstacles remain. To reach its full potential, the country must do two things: undergo serious political reforms to provide a space for the private sector in its energy mix, and formulate ambitious and serious commitment to sustainable development and greenhouse gas reduction. Mexico's economy and population will benefit as a result. This is just a small picture of the overall actions that Mexico has done in the past couple of years. And I wanted to show that because in the VNR, there's really not a lot of information. There was very little that was related to climate action. And so that made me think, well, where is Mexico at? And as you could see from, the graphs that I showed you, it's not really doing really well and stuff. And what's happening with that is that there has been no new investment in renewable sources. And so why is that? And so when I went just kind of looking around to see if there was an explanation, and it seems like the current president, I personally think that he would like to keep all the investments, all the control within the country of Mexico, and not to privatize and not to have any foreign investments, because then you lose that power of controlling that. And so I think that's one of the biggest fears. What I am hoping for is that with the new president that's coming in, that she will be able to have some investment in renewables or resources. And they do have that capacity to do that. It's just a matter of how they do that. And not to be so critical of them, because I know they've been doing a lot of reforestation, working with agriculture, kind of a little bit of a balance there. But the reality is, in order to reach those benchmarks, they have to really push forward on what they committed to back in 2012. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And you have given us a good insight from your longitudinal approach to climate policy and energy policy in Mexico, and brought interesting insight with the way that policy has shifted under different leadership, which highlights the importance of political will of individuals to take action on this goal. Thank you very much. And now in our final minutes, we will hear from Sister Sarudzai Mutero, who is a Dominican Sister of Peace and who will be speaking about climate action in Zimbabwe. Sister Saru.
Good afternoon. Greetings to you all. Yes, thank you very much, Teresa. I think you have given me a new identity, a Dominican Sister of Peace, but I belong to the Dominican Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Yes, that's where I belong. So when I was in New York recently for the High Political Forum, I learned that 2 minutes, 3 minutes are very important. So I will try to keep to that or even a little bit more, but I will try to be short in my presentation. So if you can share the slides that you have. Maybe as she's sharing the slides, I also want to start by saying our government also presented during the High Political Forum. And one thing that I've realized on the ground, there is a strategy that they have now used. And the strategy is to work in the schools, especially encouraging the young people to do some competitions on the issues to do with climate change. So I will pick up from there and also demonstrate what the sisters are doing, the Dominican sisters, what they are doing in Zimbabwe to assist our government in fighting the climate change. The next slide. So there you see a nursery that we started in one of our schools. This was after Pope Francis call, especially after our training our few sisters on Laudato Si. So one of our capstone project was to start a nursery, and we decided to choose the exotic tree, the Kenyan croton tree. That's the one that we started. So the sisters took the course on Laudato Si animators and Laudato Si animator of the animators, so that we could have the knowledge and information that we needed for us to be able to start in the fight on climate change. The next slide. So you see that in what we're doing, we're involving the students so that they take part in the nursery. So they are the ones who are doing the weeding and also the planting of the seeds and the watering of the nursery. So we worked hand in hand with the students in the school. And you'll see that there is a strawberry plant there. So to motivate the students and also the community where we're going to share the trees, we decided to say, let's have also a nursery for the strawberry, so that as we go into the community, we give them the croton trees. At the same time, we also give them the strawberry plants for their gardens. Next slide. And there again, just showing the students their commitment to the project. So we started a club that we called the Environmental Club. And this then involved also even the teachers who assisted in making sure that the project is successful. Next slide. So you see there, the nursery was ready for planting. So usually the planting was happening during the tree planting day in December. That's when we have the rains. So we would wait and then plant in December so that we don't have challenges with water. Next slide. as we were doing our project, we decided that maybe we needed to involve a Justice Coalition of Religious, some of our members, to also collect the trees from us, from the nursery, because we had lots. We had 5,000 the first time, and then the second time we had 10,000 in our nursery. So some religious came and collected trees. That's Father Joachim Clarigen, and he was going also to share with the parishioners so that they could also plant trees in their homes and at the parish where he was. Next slide. So we also encouraged the teachers to teach by example to the students that they were interacting with. So for each birthday, whenever a teacher had a birthday at the school, then you plant a tree that they were going to nurture it up to the end. So there is some of our teachers who were planting a tree to mark their birthdays. Next slide. Then we also involved the CPS sisters who are in Zimbabwe. We are also working with them in the JCoR community who work with them. So they also came to collect some trees. They work in the hospital, so they planted some of the trees in the hospital where they work. Next slide. Then when we saw that actually the project was going on well, we decided to move from the urban area where we were based to move to the rural area. And you see that there is Sister Tendai. We have a media house where we do the filming. It's a studio. Evangelization happens from there. So they move from place to place, and in the rural areas, they manage to identify places where they would say it's too bare, so let's assist in making sure that we plant some trees. So we chose some rural schools, and through our donors, those who helped us to fulfill the project, we managed to get some funds for us to reach out to these schools in the rural areas. And for these ones, we worked mainly with the community and the students, and also with the teachers. And one thing that motivated the students and also the community in the rural areas is we started by drilling boreholes for them. So that was one of the motivators for them, having water near the school, and then also giving them fruit trees first. And each child was supposed to take care of the fruit trees that they were planting until they finished school, and there were some rewards to acknowledge their efforts in taking care of the trees. Next slide. So again, there we see the students carrying their citrus fruit tree that was orange trees that they were carrying. So that's what they were growing. Next slide. And there they were receiving, and I was giving them, and we had visited them in their school. And maybe also one thing that we did was to fence the orchard where they were going to put the fruit trees. Next slide. So there is Sister Tendai. She was demonstrating also on to the students on how to plant the trees. And the other students who had already planted were already fetching water to go and water their trees that they had already planted. Next slide. And there again, we're giving the trees, but at the same time, I want you to pay attention to the tank that we have there, and a solar panel. So we had challenges again in those areas. So we decided to have solar powered bores, and then need to also have a tank to store the water so that the students can easily access the water when they need it. Next slide. And we decided to have a plantation of gum trees because the area was too bare. There were less trees in that area. So that's a plantation that we decided, and we worked hand in hand with the the forestry, they're the ones who were recommending what type of a gum tree we should plant in the areas where we were working from. So we used the one that has got the branches, not the straight ones for harvesting poles. Next slide. So there are the students with the tank that is showing there, and their school also showing, and the solar panel. Next slide. And there, that was on tree planting day, and we were planting some trees, and each person, each student would plant a tree on tree planting day. So would even move to the community and also to the graveyard. So I should think this one is the last slide that we have. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Sarudzai, and what beautiful green scenes and happy faces we saw there in your projects. And I especially like the idea of giving responsibility for ongoing care of fruit trees to the students who did the planting, which is a good response to a challenge that has been identified by so many of our speakers with relation to popular education and cultivating an appreciation for nature and for forests and for care of the earth, which is so necessary in every society. So you are cultivating that appreciation as you cultivate trees themselves. I want to thank everyone for your beautiful contributions today. And thanks also to our interpreters who made it possible for us to communicate across so many different parts of the world. And I hope that you will all join us again tomorrow as we hold the fourth session of this SDG Lab, which will be dedicated to Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is to promote peace, justice, and strong public institutions. And that will be at the same time tomorrow. So please join us then. Once again, thanks to all, and we hope to see you and learn more from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Un abrazo para todos.
Merci, merci. Merci, bonne journée à toutes. Merci.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, everyone, for the good sharing.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah.